Hello. Hello.
Hello.
We are here with Darlene Marshall at Boscombe. And Darlene, interestingly enough, at a science fiction convention, is a romance writer. And I have had the honor of paneling with Darlene, and she's a great moderator and a great conversationalist. And I'm very curious, and I think I asked her this before, but fortunately I forgot. How does a romance writer end up at multiple science fiction conventions?
If you knew me many years ago, you would know me under a different name. When I first became involved with science fiction, I was strictly a science fiction fan, and it's not a secret. My real name is Eve Ackerman. And I became involved in fandom at NorEastCon 2. Quickly thereafter, I became involved in working at conventions and have done so for the rest of my life. When I started writing romance novels, I still was a science fiction fan. So I was still attending conventions, and people who were programming the convention said, you could do panels because you can talk about being a romance writer and how that relates to science fiction, working sensuality into your scenes, doing research because I write historicals, talking about the different subgenres of literature and how they get sold, things of that sort.
We were actually accused of not having girlfriends due to the one romance scene we put in our book, so indeed there might be something there.
Right. I suspect that there's a dearth of good romantic build-up and or scenes in typical genre science fiction.
I hate to have to agree with you, but that has certainly been my experience. I famously remember when Connie Willis was Toastmistress at one of the World Cons. She talked about a filmmaker who had won the Academy Award that year for a major science fiction film. And she said, has he ever been on a date and had a conversation with a real woman? Because the women characters in the film were so strange and not at all realistic. So I agree with you, all kidding aside. I think that we can all learn from each other. I can certainly learn about world building from science fiction writers that I know, and I like to think that maybe I can help pass along some tips on making your scenes sound more realistic and more enticing to the reader.
Right. A little anecdote, and we'll go a little bit longer in this interview because it's just so much fun. When Eitan and I had to write that first, sex scene between the protagonist and his love interest, we didn't know how to do it. And
Did you block it out, the two of you together?
Not quite. So
Actually,
my wife,
little to do with it, ironically.
my wife, who has like a double master's, comparative religion and Hebrew studies and all sorts of stuff. So she likes Harlequin romance, red letter. I guess it's red cover.
Red cover.
Red cover.
Right.
So I said, well,
is like porn.
The hotter ones.
Yeah.
the hotter one. So I
Proper
said, well, why don't you lend me one of your books, and I'll just sort of block out a sex scene from there, and then I'll work my characters into it with all the science fiction stuff, because we had a transformed figure, whatever. My wife loved it. We sent it out to the test readers, and they all said too much information. So apparently it was a very good sex scene, so much so that even to this day we have people who will come up to us every now and then at conventions who heard about it and said, can I read the sex scene? We do not email it out.
Censored.
We have it usually on our laptop, and we'll open it up and let them read it, and then we'll close it back up.
Here's the thing about, as we call it, sensual writing, or putting sex scenes into your writing, because not all romance novels have graphic sexual scenes. Many of them are what we used to call suites, where it would end on a kiss, or inspirationals for the Christian market, which tend not to have graphic sex scenes for understandable reasons. It's a marketing thing. But I think any good romance writer will tell you that the sex scene has to advance the story. In other words, you should be learning something about those characters from what they're doing while they're making love.
I think we actually worked it out.
No, it advanced. That's a very good point. It advances the story because the forbidden love now becomes sort of, now they've really crossed the barrier kind of thing. So it advances it in that way. What Darlene's saying is very interesting, that the discourse, the movement, who is in command, who is on top, part of the expression, how that dance happens should tell you some new things about those characters. We didn't really consider that. That's actually very interesting.
Even where you touch one another.
Right.
And how you touch one another. And the words you use, and all the senses, what you're smelling, what you're hearing. Every detail, if it's properly done, should tell the reader more about that character, perhaps more importantly, that character's relationship to the other character.
Right, because it's the moment of ultimate vulnerability.
Exactly.
Ah,
so
I like that.
That's why a romance writer at a science fiction convention can be an advantage.
Okay. Well, why don't we break here for a second so you can tell us about what you're working on, what's coming up?
I just had a book published a couple months back called The Bride and the Buccaneer, and it is on sale here at Boscone, so I've been getting some good buzz on it, and the reviews have been positive. And the book I'm working on now is called Castaway Dreams, and the one-sentence description is a blonde and a braniac get stranded on a desert island. And it's about two individuals in 1817. He's a retired Royal Navy surgeon. She's a blonde heiress from totally different worlds. And they have to figure out how to survive on this little island in the Caribbean without killing each other and prosper and whatnot. And of course, they learn a lot about each other in the process. Then they get rescued by pirates, and things get complicated at that point. So Castaway Dreams is the book that I have in progress, and I'm trying something really different with this one. I didn't start out this way, but I'm beginning to think that the villain, the pirate villain in this book is going to be the hero of my next book. So I'm kind of walking this tightrope.
Plank, as it were.
As it were. Thank you. Good analogy. Making him villainous enough to be a believable character and source of conflict in the book. But he can't kick the dog or, you know, drop a kid over the side or do anything like that, because I've got to be able to redeem him to make him the hero for the next book.
Got it. Is there a website that our viewers can go to see your stuff?
Sure. They can go to Darlene Marshall.m4v.
Okay.
And there are excerpts of all of my books there.
Right.
And information about upcoming appearances, and I have a blog that links to that, and I'd love to hear from readers or anybody with questions.
Great. We'll superimpose that on this vid when we're done. So they've heard it from you verbally, and they'll get it from them.
So if you're not seeing it right here at this time, something went wrong.
Thank you very much, Darlene, for being on neverendingpanel.com.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, gentlemen.